كلكم عدمنا خيركم وسلز مزاقكم كابل بينا نمسكن نتستفتر مدنو جايون يكرتان حتت زد حرموال مدمنا المجمار مجمرة سماعتاتنا اتم قدم انت هزبي لهم مستسوؤوا جاغانو دك هزبن اتم هزون داغم تقاليسوم هزب تግራይን مريتان حران موصا يقالو ሲፋለሙ ዘሎ جاغانونا نمذكر زخره سماعتات كنغبر ندال خلاتنا داني.
Yes, thank you, Maza. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this historical celebration of Lakatit Asert Hade. This is the 46th anniversary and of the inception of Tigray's People Liberations Front. And we are delighted that you are here with us. We have many things in place for today. Sorry for the delay with the technical difficulties, but we're honored you're here. We will start with the first song, which is a moment of silence for our fallen heroes and those that have sacrificed for our freedom. Thank you.
يعني لنا حبني ندحر راديو خوينكا تناي مزخاخر سماعتات انسترومنتال تقبر لنا مو كلنا عرفتي يعني لنا جاغاننا سلا ذكرنا قبل بينا مسكن كلنا نعرف.
You may all be seated. Thank you.
Okay. بمقطل مدامنا خنجمرينا كمتي استغاله لو معنتي بزحات مدلوات يوم زلونا نمجمار زاكل جن مخفتي مدرة جيرن تناي لو معنتي مدامنا زخافت لنا قاشانا مدرخ كنقدمينا اتنقاشا ناي عتاد ركب زوي حلافيت وزيرو أزعد أبرهاين وزيرو أزعد أبرها تمدرخ نعخن يحزي.
To kickstart our event today, first up is going to be Miss Atzadeh Abraha. Public Relations from ATAD. Thank you.
unmute ግበርዋ ጃዓት ማዛ unmute ግበርያ
thank you يغنيلي بقدامنا تابزي عدمنا أخبركم أبزي تركوا كعبد حان مزاخهم يبل بشم أتاد كابزو أتسئلة بشم كلن أبزي دياسبورا زلوا محبرات لتز سنعد أمل أختي لهزب تقرأي حزب تقرأي أب دياسبورا بزلوا كلن ناي تقارو ودابتاتن محبراتاتن شم እንኳን ምጽምባል መበል 46 ዓመት ምጅማር ብረታው ቃልስ ህዝብ ትግራይ 11 ለካቲት ኣብ ጽሕካ ናይ ሎሚ በዓል 11 ለካቲት ህዝብና ኣብ ታሪኽካ ካብ ዘጋጠሙኻ ብድሆታት ብዓይነቱን መጠኑን ኣዝዩ ጥንኩር ኣብ ዝተሓላለኸ ኩነታት ኮይንካ እተኽብሮ ዘለኻ ታሪኻዊ በዓል እዩ ታሪኻውያን ጸላእትና ትምክሕተኛታትን ተስፋኛታትን ከምቲ ኩሉ ግዜ ዝገብርዎ ዘሎን ዘየሎን ዓቕሞም ኣዋዲዶም ናይ ደገ ወረርቲ ሓይልታት ዓዲሞም ሎሚ ይረኸብናዮ ሎሚ ይሰኣናዮ ሕሱር መንፈስ ከም ህዝቢ ከጽንቱኻ ኩሉ ዝከኣሎም ኣስካሕካሕቲ ገበናት ኣብ ልዕሌኻ ይፍጽሙ ኣለዉ ኣዴታት ይዕመፃ ይድፈራ ኣለዋ መናእሰይ ምሁራት ይርሸኑ ጥሮተኛታት መራሕትኻ ይቕተሉን ይእሰሩን ይንገላትዑን ሃፍትኻ ንብረትካ ጥሪትካ ተወሪሩ ተዘሪፉ ትካላትካን ቅስታትካን ዓልዮም እዚ ኩሉ በደላት ኣብ ልዕሌኻ ክፍጸም ዝረአየ ኣብ መላእ ዓለም ንርከብ ደቅኻ ድማ ኣድላይ ዘበለ ኩሉ ምትዕራያትን ምስጥጣማትን ጌርና ሓድነትና ጠናኺርና እቲ ገጢሙካ ዘሎ ጸገም ሰጊርካ ምእንታን ክትወፅእ ኣብ ጎንኻ ኮይና ብርቱዕን ቀጻልን ናይ ዲፕሎማስያውን ካልኦት ኣድለይቲ ቃልስታትን ኣብ ምግባር ንርከብ ውጽኢቱ ድማ የምጽእ ኣሎም ጸገማት ማሕበረሰብ ዓለም ክፈልጦ ጌርና ህዝቢ ዓለም ድማ እዚ ግንዛበ እዚ ድሮ ስጉምትታት እውን ንምውሳድ ይጀምር ኣሎም ቃልስና ብምቕጻል ተወሰኽቲ ጠንካራ ስጉምትታት ኣብ ልዕሊ ጸላእኽትኻ ክውሰድ ዘይተሓለለ ጻዕርና ክንቅጽለሉ ኢና ኣንተ ሓያዋ ህዝብና ዘይትፍታሕ ጅግና ጽኑዕ ህዝብና ከም ወትሩ ምስ ጸላእትኻ ክሳድ ንክሳድ ተሓናኒቕካ መንነትካን ባህግታትካን ንምዕቃብ እትገብሮ ዘለኻ መስደም መመቓልስን ጥምጥምን ኣኹሪዕና ኣሎ ዓለም ድማ እዚ ህዝቢ እዚ መን እዩ ኢሉ ቅንዕ ኢሉ ክርኤካ ኣገዲድካዮ ኣለኻ ቃልስኻ ጠናኺርካ ቀጽለሉ እዚ ጥምጥም እዚ ኢድኒ ተተሓይዝና ጸላእትና ሲዒርና ኣብ ቅድሚ ዓለም ኣሕፊርናዮም ብዓወት መሰስ ከም እንብል ኣይንጠራጠርን ታሪኽካ ምስክርካ እዩ ጸላእትና ሲዒርና ምስ ምን ንወፅእ ድማ ካብ ሕሉፍ ታሪኽና ተማሂርና ዝበለጸን ዘይተሓለለን ህዝቢ ጥራይ እንተይኮነስ ሓድነትና ከም ሓፂን ዝጠንከረ ምሒር ሓያላትን ተሻገርትን ህዝቢ ኮይና ብዝተዓጻጸፈ መልክዑ ተሳሒልና ክንወፅኢና ኣንታ ኽቡር ህዝብና ዓውትናን ዕድልካን ብመንነትና ኣብ ኢድና ምዃና ፈሊጥካ ኩለ መዳይ ቃልስኻ ኣሕይልካ ጸላእትኻ ብምድምሳስ ንዘይተርፍ ዓወትና ናህሪ ጉያኻ ኣዛይድ መጻኢና ብቃልስና ብርሁን ድሙቕን እዩ ክብርን መጎስን ኩሎም ሰማዕታትና መትከላት 11 ጽኒዕና ወረርትን ሕምሽሽ ጥምረት ማሕበራት ትግራይ ኣብ ዲያስፖራ ትግራይ ትስዕር ይቐኒለይ
يغني لنا ويزرو أزاد عبرها بدعم مسكنة خبر ملختي داني زقدم قاش زقد القاش أنا قدمي مفلاتنا.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Asada Abraha, Public Relations of ATAD, for your sound message on what's taking place currently in Tigray, and to the people of Tigray, general. Following, I'll let Maza introduce our next guest, and then I'll also do it in English. Thank you.
يغني لنا بمقتل كبور أمباسادر فسا أسكدوم مخفتي مدرن مجلسي ودباوي منجستي تجراين كحلفوا لنا يوم أمباسادر فسا أسكدوم تمدرخ نعكم يحزي.
Next up is Ambassador Fisa Askedom, who would be introducing us, or who would be here with a statement from the government of Tigray.
يغني اللي زخبركا هزب تجراي زخبركم أما العالم تركوا تجارو زخبركم عوش تعدن وصان تركوا محاذات هزب تجراي زخبركم حدما تجاش زخبركم مدالوتي سنبل بعلكاتي عصر تحت زخبركن زخبركم أقدمي متكلات لكاتي عصر تحت عتيرنا صلاتنا نحمشش بزول تيما ناوز خبر مبل 26 عام بعد لكاتي عصرت حدا دقيمه انكو عبصح ناخذ الفت نايله بزون بعد لكاتي عبلعلي مننتنا هلاونا تزخف حدقا ابزن صلالو لخنتات كوينا عمل العالم كاب عصرت لكاتي جميرنا بستفلاليو بروغرامات نحورنا يوزلنا بعد ايو ابصن كل كنتات كوينا حزباو بعلنا خم وترو بدمكت كنخبر كاترن ليتن زرعكمن زدخمكمن نخلهم بشم حزبن منجستن تجراي يغني لنا كبرتي هابلنا خبل فت لكاتي تعسرت حاجه انت نخبر بحدقت انصار وررتن عصباتن برا تقنيعهم زكواشو حزلو تمر حيلم كل غال تجراي ازو علو قدم جنبارات اب حزباو علامات طويلو نصلاي مستعصصف حيل سون اصواراتون كبت خسراتات كبصح بمغبار زحفسو زلو عبيت عوتات خالي قص دما اب غوغاصلاي زلو حزبناون انقايدوس نفتوتو نصلاون زسدم حبون صناعتن حيزو نصلاي يتحنانا كم زلو بمذكاري حزب تግራይ ክንዲ ጽቡቕ ዝገበረ ሃገር ዘናይ بالعالم بتاعتن بدك سبات كجبر تبهايلو فتصيمو زي حساب قفعي كبصحو طراي انت يكونس نتزبصحو زلو قفعي محبرسو عالم كيفلطو نمشفان بصلاتي تعلم شرحي بطاطيسكو قبل على حزبنا زبصح زلو مسكاخ حقفعي نخلو خباصحن قبل عليتهم قبنياتاتن ወንጀለኛታትን ድማ ጽዑጽዑን ተخبصح ኣብ ምግባር ኣብ ወጻኢ ዘለኹም ተጋሩ بعينቱ ዝተፈለየም ቅስቃስ ብምግባር ቃልስና ናብ ዝለዓለ ብራኸ ክበጽሕ ጌርኩም ይኹን ዲያስፖራ ተጋሩ ትግራይ ኤምባሲ ይብላን ከይትበሃል ገዛኹምን ናይ ስራሕ ቦታኹምን ከም ኤምባሲ ብምጥቃም ትግራይ ኣምባሳደራትን ዲፕሎማታትን ተሓለቕትን ይብላን ከይትበሃል ድማ ካብ ንኡስ ክሳብ ዓብይ ኣብ ስራሕቲ ዲፕሎማሲን ኣድቮኬሲን ብምንጣፍ ኣብ ሚድያ ኣብ ህዝባዊ ምልዓልን ገንዘባውን ሓገዝን ኮታስ ሓንቲ በዓላ ዝኽኣለት ሃገር ክትገብሮ ዝግባእ ኩሉ ሚድያዊ ስራሕቲ ብምስራሕ ድምፂ ህዝብኹም ብምዃን እትገብርዎ ዘለኹም ዝሕብን ምንቅስቓስ ኣብ ታሪኽ ህዝቢ ትግራይ ናይ ባዕሉ ፍሉይ ቦታ ሒዙ ክስነድ እዩ ዝኸበርኩም ዕድማ ተጋይሽ ዝኸበርክንን ዝኸበርኩም በዓል ለካቲት ነኽብሮ ኣያታትናን ብጾትናን ኣብ ሕሉፍ ዝሰርሕዎ ቅያ ክንዝክር ጥራይ ኣይኮነን የግዳስ እቶም ዝሓለፉን ዘለውን ጀጋኑ ዝሰርሕዎ ታሪኽ ዝተረኸበ ዓወት ዓቂብና ጽንዓቶም ሰኒቕና ነቲ ዝገደፉልና ሕድሪ ኣብ ሽቱ ክነብጽሕ ብዘይወዓል ሕደር ተሰጣጢምና ንቅድሚት ንምምራሽ ሓበራዊ ቃል ኪዳን እናኣትወሉ ዕለት እውን እዩ ስለዝኾነ بحزب استمرت حقاوي منقستي تقراي بحيلي كنبرك خوون زمصو وررتن عصباتن بزعيرفتي انت مكت عواصاي زلنا تغارو دما فرق سراح منقستي تقراي مالتون سراحات تركبات وصاي متخخاب هابتي سراحتي ميدان كالوتن بمشكام هابتي حزين نغورو زلنا احيلنا قالسنا خنقساقسلو نتزي يترف عاوتون كندالو بزقات امزي بشم منقستي تقراي صاوعيتي يقرب صلاتنا ካብ ግንባራት ኣብ ግንባራት ዘጋጥሞም ዘሎ خسارات ምሽካም ስለዘይ ካሉ ተወሳኺ ጿራትን ገንዘባዊ ሓገዝን ክልምኑ ናብ ዝተፈላለዩ ሃገራትን ትካላትን ይዋፈሩሉ እዚ ምንቅስቃስ እዚ صلاتنا ፀሓዮም ተዓርቦም ከም ዘላ ዘመላኽት እዩ ስለዝኾነ ኣብታ ናይ መወዳእታ ሰዓቶም እውን ተኾነ ንህዝብና መቕሰልትን መጋፍዕን ዝውዕል ሓገዝ ከይረኽቡ ከም ዝተለመደ ዝተዋረደ ወፍሪ ብምግባር ክነፍሽሎ ከም ዘለና خلابو يدلي زخبركم عدما تقايش زخبركن زخبركم مشتر عاوتنا اب حدنتنا مخانو تردو صلاتي حبرتنا حدنتان ادنقي صبوم امونغونا اتيوم حدنتنا المزراق تلموصيوم باجه تقميطوم باندا دياسپوران خدبو منقسقاس جميرملو ስለዝኾነ صلاي امونغونا خاتو ዝኾነ ይኹን እሽተይ ክንድ ጣፍት ኸውን ነኻሉውን ብምድፋን ከም ትልሙድ ንጸላእትና ሕፊርና ከም ንወጽ በዘጋጣም ዚና ተሐሳሰብኩ ናይልሙ በዓል ዘዳለወ በዓለም ደረጃ ዘጣሽናዮ ጽላል ማሕበርና ጥምረት ማሕበራት ዲያስፖራ ትግራይ ክጠናኸርን ንኹላና ሓቂፉ ንቅድሚት ህግስግስን ሰኻልና ሁሉ ክንገብር በዘጋጣም ዚ ከተሐሳስብ ይደሊ ትግራዋይ ንቃሕ ትግራዋይ ተወደብ ትግራዋይ ተቃለስ ትግራዋይ ተዓወት መትከላት ለካቲት 11 ዓቲርና صلاتنا نحمشش ክብርን ሞገስን ንጀጋኑ ሰዋዕትና ትግራይ ተሰዕር ያቅንየለን
يقنيلنا كور امباسادر ፍስሓ ንመንግስቲ ትግራይ ብምውካል ንዘሰማዕኹምና መልእኽቲ ካብ ልቢና ምስክን يقنيلنا
Thank you Ambassador Fisa Skarom for your timely message. Today, let's see, make sure we're muting some of the lines. Today we celebrate Lakat Tasser Hada in unusual fashion. We are under attack by multiple forces. With this, he took the time to appreciate the diaspora community for acting as the ambassadors of Tigray. Tigray obviously does not have ambassadors that act in an ambassador capacity, but you, Tagaru, across the world have acted in a way that you've made your homes as the offices to be the ambassadors of Tigray. And so for that, he extend his appreciation. Following, we are again still under attack by many forces. He believes, we all believe that we will come victorious from this invasion, but we need to be resilient. We need to continue to fight. We need to continue to be the voice for the voiceless, because under this attack, it's not only attacking our people, but it's also attacking their abilities to communicate what's taking place on their behalf. And so with that, Ambassador Fisa, thank you very much for your message. Next, we will I'll pass this back to Maza so you can introduce what will take place next. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. بمقصد نيلو معنتي مدواتنا قمتي قدمي لنا زولنا يوم سفالالي عبيت ملختات عدما تقايشنا اللونا نعوون نتبريتها قالسنا زخاخرو نتجد نكزو تقراي زمسكرو هاي سنة بصراحة توين سلازلونا كواتم حنتي زخان الدار في حزقن انقدكم هنا ناب حاوني يكوسدكم حاوني
أكبر نبعث بينا
قنيلنا ارتيست افريم بتعمي نمسكن طباب كندينا حيال مخانو نرداء كينتنا نتي هزو تግራይ حلفو زلو قدم حزون حلفو زمصه طبابان وطعن مود محران انجግነቱን بخمزي بحصر تقالات ገይሮም ክገልጽና خلو ናይ طباب ንዝረዝነት ንርዳእሞ ንድምጻዊ افريم ካብ ልቢና መስክን حزب مقصال بتعمي نفوتዮ እንخورو አቦና አያና ማገር ህዝብ ትግራይ ሃገር ትግራይ ዝኾነ ጅግና ተጋዳላይ ስያ አብርሃ አሞንጎና ለማዓንቲ ይርከብ ጅግና ተጋዳላይ ስያ አብርሃ ናይ ብዙሓት ወለደታት ጅግና እዩ መርአያ ኩሎም ጽንዓትን ሕራንን ህዝብ ትግራይን ይውንሞ ሕዚ መልእኽቲ ክሕልፈልና ናኡየ ከተሓላልፈኩም ቅድሚኡ ዳኒ በእንግሊዝኛ ገይሩ ነቶም ካልኦት ተኸታተልትና ከፋልጠልና እዩ ንጋሻና ይቕነይለይ
Thank you Maza. Thank you Ephraim Amara for the timely song. Again, can we mute? Thank you. Again, thank you, Ephraim Amara, for that timely song. It is. Can we please, moderators? Thank you. It's important for us to understand that artists play a pivotal role. They played a pivotal role in the struggle in the 17 years. But also in today, what Tagayans are facing for artists to come out and come with music to express the atrocities our people are facing. It's important that we acknowledge their contributions to the movement. Following, we have a lifelong fighter, a freedom fighter to the truest meaning. Tagalalai Siye Abraha, who is among us, who would like to share a message. We are honored for your service and contributions, but we are also humbled that you're able to join us today. So I'll pass it along to Tagalalai Siye Abraha. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel Maza. Quranin تعنا باللي نكو عبس حنا ينعن باهل يكاتيت عفسان عبدستان ترح يكونان نكو عبس حنا نقول عب حزنن عب صعبان عب مسوعتن كوين ناول نكو عبس حنا إنا خنبها زلنا درتنا نفعنا بملء أمنت كمن حلفو آمنا كعب صحنا إنا نبهال كعب صحكم كعب صحنا نقولنا نوترون نتا نايسن عاتن مسواتنا نون ناي تسفاتاتنا ون حباريت زخونة يكاتيت انكو عبس حنا النابلنا عينا النذكرى نتا نمسا زي ترف ناي عاوت يكاتيتون كومو النابلنا عينا كنسقع حمي يكاتي تبعيلنا أنا أقول ترجع خمس لهم معنتي أما غلا نيرا لو مخاي كاتت نبع لنا أما نقول قلتيو عمي فلا لا يلو عمي زنبر الناس سلامن كسانة تزرقو بزتفالا ليو نايوشتن نايوصعان وررتي كوينات أوجنا نزورار النامكتنا عنا نزانا يلو ملكاتت نبعلا زلنا عمي بعبي تحقوسن تسفان نلكاتي تبعيلنا يا لومي عبي قطعن حرانن كوينا هلوننا نموحاس حارسة محدرانا كبرتنا نابزنا برو نمملاس عب كبيد من ربراب نقال سناتنا عنا نلكاتي تنبعلا زلنا نتي عب العلناز تعوجة ورار بصنعات مكيتنا هلا ونان لولا ونتنان عب زي نقنق مسارت ملسنا خمن نقمت أدما أي ترتب هلا ونان لولا ونتنان ملسنا كنا حسوقنا نمنتاي كابتن أي عمي نابز ذهني هنا يو خنتات آتينا إلنا كنمرمر يقبعنا زي يدلينا قبل كله نساتنا خنيتشقاچقلو كنكاساسلو أيكودن نتي على قدمنا زني حقالسي زحيل تمرتي كنوسدلو منتن إذا زني هي حدقة يزند نيرو شعوب تزاربكو نيرو نكساسة يدلينا حادنة يدلينا خذ يكون دامبر كملنا نابزي آتينا እንታይ ንምሃር ክንፈልጥ የድልየና እዩ ምክንያቱም ቅድሜና ከቢድ ስራሕ ከቢድ ቃልሲ ዘሎ ዝንየናሉ ኩነታት ከቢድካ እንትኾነ ክስገር ዘይከኣል ግን ኣይኮነን ክንሰግሮ ኢና ክንሰግሮ ምእንታን ድማ ዝተማልአ ገምጋምን ምርድዳእን ክንሕዘሉ ይግባእ ንኩልና ዝሓቁፍ ዓቕምታትና ዘዋድድ ንኩሎም መልክዓት ቃልሲ ዘወሃህድ ብዙሓት መቃልስትን መሓዝቱን ብዙሓት መቃልስትን መሓዙትን ዝፈጥረልና ግን ድማ ጸላእቲ ዘውሕደልና ኣካይዳ ክንሕንፅፅ ግድን ይኸውን ክደግሞ እዩ ምእንታን ክንሰግሮ ንኩልና ዝሓቁፍ ዓቕምታትና ዘዋድድ ንኩሎም መልክዓት ቃልሲ ዘወሃህድ ብዙሓት መቃልስትን መሓዙትን ዝፈጥረልና ግን ድማ ጸላእቲ ዘውሕደልና ኣካይዳ ክንሕንፅፅ ግድን ይኸውን ዝበፅሓና ጉድኣት ገዚፍ ምስ ምዃኑ ተመዓራሪና ንምውፃእ ግዜ ከም ዝወስድ ምንም ጥርጥር የብሉን ከቢድ ከም ዝኸውን እውን ንርዳእ የድሊ እድሆታት ሰጊርካ ተፃዊርካ ምሕላፍ ብዝምልከት ግን ንዓና ሓድሽ ኣይኮነን ክንሰግሮ ኢና ነቲ ኩነታት ንምስጋር ነቲ ዝለመድናዮ ኣካይዳ ምኽታል ወይ ምድጋም እኹል ኣይኸውን ነዚ ንህናዮ ኩነታት ንምስጋር ነቲ ዝለመድናዮ ኣካይዳታት ምኽታል ወይ ንዕኡ ምድጋም እኹል ኣይኸውን ነቲ ዝነበረ ክነማዕብሎ ሓደሽቲ ድማ ክንውስኸሉ ንሎም ሓደሽቲ ድማ ክንውስኸሉ ይግባእ የድሊ ንሎም ማዓንቲ ኣብ ዝተወሰነ ነገራት ኣትኩረ ክዛረብ ይደሊ ኣብ ክልል ጉዳይ ሓደ ንኩሉ ትግራዋይ ናይ ኩሉ ትግራዋይ ዓቕሚ ዘኽትት ወፍርን ፖለቲካዊ መድረኽ ምፍጣርን የድልየና እዚ ቃልሲ እዚ ናይ ኩሉ ትግራዋይ እዩ ኮይኑ ድማ ኣሎ ናይ ፖለቲካ እምነት ናይ ሃይማኖት እምነት ናይ ጾታ ይኹን ናይ ዕድመ ኣፈላላይ ብዘየግድስ ናይ ኩሉና ቃልሲ ናይ ኩሉና ቃልሲ ናይ ኩሉኹም ቃልሲ ናይ ኩሉኹን ቃልሲ ኣብዚ ተፈጢሩ ዝኒኦ ሓድነት ዓብይ ጸጋ እዩ ክንሕበነሉን ኣኽቢርና ተኻናኺና ክንሕዞን ክንሕይሎን ይግባእ ኣፈላላይ ክህልወና ይኽእል እዩ ይኩን ደኣ እምበር ኣፈላላይ ንፈላላይ ምቕያሕ ዘይኮነስ ነቲ ሓደ ዝገብረና ክንሕይልን ነቲ ሓደ ዝገብረና ክንሕይልን ክኹላዕ ክንገብር ኢና ክንሰርሕ ዘለና ዝብል እምነት ኣለኒ ነቲ ቀዳማዋይ ዕጥቃዊ ቃልሲ ዝፈለመ መሪሑ ዝዕወተን ህወሓት እዩ ነዚ ኣስተዋፅኦ ነኽብሮ በዚ ድማ ብህወሓትን በቶም ስውኣትናን እናተሓበና ክንነበር ኢና ይኹን ደኣ እምበር እዚ ሎም ዝኒሄ ቃልሲ ንሓደ ወይ ንውስናት ፖለቲካዊ ፓርቲታት ጥራሕ ዝግደፍ ኣይኮነን ናይ ኩሎም ፖለቲካውን ሲቪላውን ውዳበታት ተጋሩ ናይቶመው ዝኾነ ውዳበ ዘየለዉ ቅዱሳት ተጋሩ ብጠቕላላ ናይ ኩልኽን ናይ ኩሉና ቃልሲ ነዚ ዝተገንዘበ ሓድሽ ፖለቲካዊ ጥምረት ኣወዳድባን ናይ ስራሕ ክፍፍልን ምግባር ኣድላይን እዋናውን ይኸውን ኣሎ እዚ እንተዘይ ተፈጢሩ ንኩሉ መልክዓት ቃልሲ ንኩሉ ዘሳትፍ ኣብ ኩሎም ኩርናዓት ዓለም ዝካየድ ጥሙር ቃልሲ ክነካይድ ኣይንኽእልን እዚኣቶም ክነካይድ ከምዚ ዝበለ ጥምረት የድልየና ናብ ዓወት ዘብፅሓና መገዲ ድማ እዙይን ጥራሕ እዩ ካልኣይ بكل ملكعات قالسي نسألاتها مبده كلهم ملكعات قالسي من الممادن محيالن يدلينا سلامن لزبن نسيكم نمربتنا مسيوم زلو حيلتات كبانا زطلوو منبر كاخن وردتن كساب زخونه ናይ ዕጡ ሓፋሽ መኸተ ህዝብና ክቕፅል ምንብርካ ኢድ መሃብ ዝበሃል የለን እዚ ከም ዘሎ ኮይኑ ኣብኡ ጥራሕ ምምርኳስ ንዕኡ ጥራሕ ምጭንጫን ክህልወና ይብል ነዚ ቃልሲ እዚ ብኻልኦት መልክዓት ቃልሲ ክነፀንብሎ ኣለና ካልኦት መልክዓት ቃልሲ ምልምማድን ምሕያልን ንዝኾነ ትግራዋይ ኣብ ዝኾነ ጫፍ ዓለም ዘሎ ትግራዋይ ኣስተዋፅኦ ክገብር ይኽእል እዩ ብቐጥታ ኣብቲ ቃልሲ ተሳታፊ ክኸውን ይገብሮ እዩ ክጥቁም ብወሰናይ መልክዑ ኣብ ከተማታት ብዝተወሰነ ደረጃ ድማ ኣብቲ ናይ ገጠር ከተማታት ምቅልቃል ጀሚሩ ዘሎ ሰላማዊ ህዝባዊ ተቃውሞን እምቢታን ሓደ ነገር እዚ ክነቕፅል ኣለና ሰሚዕኹም እንዲሁ ኣብ ትግራይ ዝካየድ ዘሎ ብልጽግና ኣብ ዝፀውዑ ኣኸባታት ሽምጦም ገቲሮም ሽንጠን ገቲረን ትኾን ዘሎ ትኾን ዘይብሉ ዝዛረቡ ሓርበኛታት ዋዕሮታት ይሰምዕ ኣለና ሰሚዕኹም እንዲሁም እግርና ቆሪፅኩምስ ዊልቸር ክንህበኩም ትብሉና ኣለኹም ዝበለት ዋዕሮ ከምዚኦም ዝበለሉ ብልጽግና ብፀውዑ ኣኸባ እውን ቃል ህዝቢ ትግራይ ዘስምዑ ድፍረትን حبون حزبنا زمسكرو سلازي حدا ملكع قاسي زي عفتو نايتهم قفعنياتات مدرخات يخون تخقبر زقبو تخبحال زقبو مزرات حزبي تخكلني أقوام كحزب مقبار نتناتاتهم ناراتيو مسبار كالي قلقالوت وهابت تكالات اللو اخلو زكافافلو كلو يقول ما يعدلا اور ناي ماي سرعات سجنا من محدار استخلو كلو يقول ابزي سرحتني هات اللو اب قلقاليو عوشت زم سرحتني هات زقبر قال سخم زلو نرئ لنا سرحهم كم زي سرحو كم زي رسعو وفرم وقننهم كم زي رسعو نرأى لنا كاو حلفو بدقة زلو كافتن تكالات وصاء زلو تقراويون مسوهم كوينون تكالس نرأى لنا زي نتمنقستي كم مدرخ نايقالسي موساد كافت مدرخ كافت منقستو وصاء زلوون مستمفت منقستو زلو قلقالات وهابتي أنا بوليتيكاوي شمانيا هاتيكم قلقالات نهزب زهو حاقاي ناي رديت مكافلتي ما يعدلا or ما يقلقلوست سجنا زقو ما مهران أوشت زلو زقورو قالسي بتم بدقة زلو تجارو خدقف زيت توهيدو خيد مقوار يدل منقستاون بوليتيكاون نايدق ቃልስን ኣዋሂድና ነቲ ስርዓት ባዕሉ ተጠቐሚትዎ ዘሎ ክንምክቶ ይግባእ ካብኡ ሓሊፉ ናይ መንግስቲ መምርሒ ኣይንቕበልን ኣይንፈጽምን ምባል እምቢታ ኣይንእከብ ናብ ዕዳጋ ኣይንወፅእ ኣብ ገዛኻ ኮፍ ምባል ኣገዲዶም ካብ ኣኸባ ከውፅዎም ከውፅዮ ይኽእሉ ንህዝብና ኣገዲዶም ክዛረቦ ዘይደሊ ክዛረብዎ ይኽእሉ ከምዚ ዝበለ ህዝባዊ እምቢታ ክፍጠር ህዝቢ ካብ ጫፍ ናብ ጫፍ ክለዓል ምግባር ከምዚኦም ዝበሉ ቃልስታት ይጃማመሩ ኣለዉ ባዕሉ ህዝብና ይጅምሮም ኣለዉ እዚኦም ብዝተወደበ ስርዓት ብዘለዎ ብዝተዋሓደ መገዲ ዘተሓባብሩ መራሕቲ ብቐጥታ ኣፍቲ ቦታ ክፍጠሩ ክነተባብዕ ኣለና ከምቲ ኣብዚ ትገብርዎ ዘለኹም በብሰፈርኩም በብከተማኹም ጠያቕ ዘይብልኩም ፀዋዕ ዘይብልኩም ባዕልኩም ትገብሩ ኣለኹም የስ ተመብክየን ዘለዉ ዝገደደ ስግኣት ኣለዎም ኣብ ሓደጋ እዮም ዘለዉ ብዝኾነን ዘይኮነን ሂወቶም ክጠፍእ ይንደልዮም ግን ናይ ህልውና ቃልሲ እዩ ክግበር ዝግብኦ እንድሕር ዳ ኮይኑ ክግበር ምግባር ኣድላይ ይኸውን ሳልሳይ ናይ ዲፕሎማሲ ናይ ኣድቮካሲን ፍትሒ ናይ ምሕታት ቃልስናን ምሕያል እዚ ንዓኹም ዝራብ ዘድለ ይኮነን ብፍላይ ኣብ ዲያስፖራን ዘለኹም ዝሓለፈ እዋን እውን ተዛሪበሉ እየ ግን ኢንተርኔት ብምዕፃው ዓለም ለኸ ዜናታት ዜና ማዕኸላት ከይኣቱ ከይዝግቡ ብምክልካል በተን ንሳቶም ዝቋፃፀርዎን ማዕኸናት ቀትርን ለይትን ብምልፍላፍ በቶም ንሶም ዝቅልብዎም ነጠፍቲ ማሕበራዊ ሚድያ ኣቢሎም ሓሶት ደጋጊሞም ስለ ዘቃልሑ ነቲ ዝተፈፀመ ግፍዒ ዝሸፈልዎ ካብ ተሓታትነት ዝሃድሙ መሲልዎም ነይሩ ዓለም ከም ዝተቐየረ ኣይትረዱ ዓለም ለኸ ሚድያ ነዚ ክልከላት እዚ ሰጊሩ ትኩነታትና ይዛረብ ኣሎ ዓለቕለቕ ኣቢልዎም ኣሎ ተዋሒጦም ኣሎ ተደናጊፆም እውን ኣሎ እቲ ዘስካሕክሕ ሓበሬታ ድማ ንመንግስታት ዓለም ለኸ ትካላትን ገበርቲ ሰላይ ትካላትን ኣደንጊፅዎም ይርከብ ረኣይኒ ስምዑኒ ከም ዘይተባሃለ ሕውኡኒ ኣይትምፅኡኒ ኣይትርኣይኒ ናብ ምባል ተኣትዩ ኣሎ ክቡራትን ክቡራትን በደልና ብዝምልከት ተፈጢሩ ዝኒሄ ዓለም ለኸ ድንጋፀ ዝወፅእ ዘሎ ምሕፅንታታት መፀዋዕታታት ንቃልስና ዓብዪ ስዳሮ እዩ ሓለፍቲ ዝተፈላለዩ መንግስታትን ሓለፍቲ ተፈላለያ ዓለም ለኸ ትካላትን ናይ ሕጂ ሓለቐ እቲ ሽግር ብሰላማዊ ልዝብ ካብ ምፍታሕ ሓሊፉ
ሰራዊት 36 ነበር ወዲ ሊቀ
እንታይ ዲኣ ሰምዕ ዘለኻ እትሪእዮ እኮ ስልከይ ጂት ክገብር
ኣዛዚ ክፍለ ሰራዊት 18
እቲ ሽግር ብሰላም
host do something.
Sorry, Tagalay, see Mahawi and everybody else. Can you guys please mute everyone? Please mute everyone.
قاتل سيدي مزمي
unmute كيركا قصر.
اوكي እቲ ዝፍጸም ዘሎ ወራራትን ዘንብ ዘሎ ናይ ጥሜት ሓደጋ ኣመልኪቱ ቋማቶም ከቃልሑ ጸኒሖም እዮም እዚ ይገበር እዚ ክኸውን ኣሎ ክብሉ ቀንዮም እዮም ይኹን ዳ እምበር ንተግባራውነቱ ኣመልኪቱ ዝውስንዎ ውሳነ ገና ኢና ንጽበ ዘለና ካብ ስቴትመንት ካብ ቋማት ዝሓልፍ ነገር የለን ስለዚህ ገና ብዙሕ ቃልሲ እኒአና እዚ ከም ዘሎ ኮይኑ ነዚ ኩነታት እዚ ብምግንዛብ መንግስቲ ትግራይ በወገኑ ነቲ ሽግር ንምፍታሕ ቁርብነቱ ገሊጹ ኣሎ ንልዝብ ኮፍ ንምባል እውን እንታይ ቅድመ ባይታታት ክማልኡ ከም ዘሎ ኣቕሚጡ ኣሎ ኣነ ግዜ እንተልዩ ተፈቂዱ ነዚአን ከም ዘለዋ ከንበን ይደሊ ባዕዳዊ ወራሪ ሰራዊት ህግደፍ ብዘይ ወዓል ሕደር ካብ መሬት ትግራይ ይውፃእ ብተግባር ምፍጻሙ ድማ ብዘይ ሸራዊ ዓለም ለኸ ኣካል ክረጋገጽ ሉዓላዊ መሬት ትግራይ ክሕሎን ነቶም እዚ ብደቡብ ብሰሜን ምዕራብ ብምዕራብን ምብራቕን ንመሬት ትግራይ ዝቃራመቱ ዝውዕሉ ዘለዉ ጸላእትና ካብዙ ቦታታት እዚ ለቂቖም ሉዓላዊ መሬት ትግራይ ክሕሎ እቲ ብሽም ጊዜያዊ ምሕዳር በቶም ጸላእትን ዝጣየሽ ዘሎ ኣካል ክፈርስ በቲ ዝተመረጸ ምሕዳር ትግራይ ናብ ቦትኡ ክምለስ ኣብ ልዕሊ ህዝቢ ትግራይን ደቂ ትግራይን ዝፍጸሙ ዘለዉ ዘርኢ ናይ ምጥፋእ ገበናት ክጻረዩ ብዘይ ሸራዊ ዓለም ለኸ ትካል ክጣየሽ ብነጻነት ንምጽራይ ዘኽእል ኩነታቱ ክማቻችወሉ ስራሕ ክጅምርን
I see, I think mute going on that line. Please, maybe 10 seconds, 30 seconds, then حلت مريسناس من رأية زلوة زلو يعني الله.
بشم ጊዜያዊ ምሕዳር ይምለስ ኣለሁ ብሽም ጊዜያዊ ምሕዳር ቶም ጸላእቲ ዘጣየሽ በቶም ጸላእትን ዝጣየሽ ዘሎ ኣካል ክፈርስ ብህዝቢ ዝተመረጸ ምሕዳር ትግራይ ድማ ናብ ቦትኡ ክምለስ ኣብ ልዕሊ ህዝቢ ትግራይን ደቂ ትግራይን ዝፍጸሙ ዘለዉ ዘርኢ ናይ ምጥፋእ ገበናት ኩናት ዘጻሪ ዘይሻራዊ ዓለም ለኻዊ ትካል ተጣይሹ ብነጻነት ንምጽራይ ዘኽእል ኩነታት ክማቻችወሉ ስራሕ ክጅምር ብሰንኪ ወረርቲ ሓይልታት ዝተማዛበሉን ንዝኸፍአ ማሕበራዊ ቅልውላው ዝተቃልዑን ልዕሊ 4.5 ሚልዮን ህዝቢ ትግራይ ህጹጽ ሰብኣዊ ሓገዝ ክበጽሖ ምግባር ሰብኣዊ ሓገዝ ንምግባር ዝመጹ ዓለም ለኻውያን ትካላት ዘይተገደበ ምንቅስቓስ ክገብሩ ምፍቃድ መሬት ትግራይ ካብ ጫፍ ናብ ጫፍ ንጋዜጠኛታት ንዘይሻራዊ ናይ ሰብኣዊ መሰል ተሓለቕቲ ዓለም ለኸ ትካላትን ምንቅስቓስ ክፉት ክኸውን ምግባር ዝተወረረን ዝዓነወን ዝተበላሸወን ንብረት መንግስቲ ንብረት ሰብ ሃፍቲ ንብረት ህዝቢ ዘይሻራዊ ዓለም ለኻዊ መጻረይ ኣካል ተጣይሹ ከጻርዮ ምግባር መጨረሻ በዚ ኩነታት ዝተኣሰሩ ፖለቲከኛታትን ካልኦት ደቂ ትግራይን ብዘይ ቅድመ ኩነት ክፍትሑ ምግባር መጨረሻ ዝልዝብ ሰላም بزي شراوي عالم لخاو مدرخ ككايد انتو خويلو طرح تفصامነት ይህልዎ ዝብል ነጥብታት ተቐሚጡ ኣሎ ክቡራትን እዞም ተቐሚጦም ዝኒሄው ነጥብታት ነቲ ዝኒሄን ኣብ ልዕሊ ህዝብና ዘዘንብ ዘሎ ሓደጋ ናይ ብርሰትን ጥሜትን ደው ብምባል አንጻር ህዝብና ጊዜያዊ መተንፈሲ ክረክብ ምግባር ዝዓለመ ልዝብ ንምጅማር ግድን ዝኾኑ ነጥብታት እዮም መብዛሕትኦም ድማ ዓለም ለኸ ማሕበረሰብ ዝዛረበሎም ዘሎ እዮም ክልዓሉን መዕለቢ ክረኽቡ ዝግብኦም ካልኦት ከበርቲ ጉዳያት ከም ዘለውና ንፈልጥ ኢና ናይ ትግራይ መጻዕ ዕድል ብዝምልከት ዝተወሰደ ሓድግታት መምላስን ዝዓነወን ዝተወረረን ዝትከኣሉ ኣገባብን ብዝምልከት ሕቶ ሕውየትን እግሪ ምትካልን ነዚ ንምስላጥ ዘድሊ ናይ ሃብቲ ምንጭታት ምንዳይ ብዝምልከት ፍትሕን ዳይነትን ረኺብና ቶም ዝጨፍጨፉና ኣብ ፍርዲ ደው ምባሎ ብዝምልከት ንቅድሚት ተመሳሳሊ ነገር ከየጋጥመና ዘላቂ ናይ ዕርቅን ይትረፍታን ፕሮግራም ምትካል ብዝምልከት ብውሕድ ብናተይ ዓቕሚ እዚኦም ዓበይቲ ነገራት ንቅድሚት ብዛዕባ ሰላም ክንዛረብ እንተደኣ ኮይና እዞም ነገራት እዚኦም ከመይ ይኹኑ ኢልና ክንዛተ ክንመኸረሎም ቅዋም ክንሕዘሎም ዝግባአና ይኹኑ እዚኦም ዝግደፉ ይኹኑ ንህዝብና ካብ ምድሓን አንጻር ነቶም ኣብ ላዕሊ ዝተቐመጡ 8 ነጥብታት ናይ ቀዳሞት ኣጀንዳ ጌርካ ክንወፍር ድልዋት ኢና እዩ ዝብል ዘሎ መንግስቲ ትግራይ እዚ ተገንዚብና ክንከይድ ኣለና ነዚኣቶም ድማ ናብቶም ዝምልከቶም ኩሎም ኣካላትን ትካላትን ክነብፅሖም ክነቃልሖም የድሊ እዚ ከም ዘሎ ኮይኑ ኣብ ማንም እዋን ዘይንስሕቶ ሓቂ ድማ ኣሎ ህልውና ህዝብናን ትካላቱን ናይ ምውሓስ ናይ ምሕያው ቃልሲ በዓል ዋናታት ንሕና ተጋሩን ጥራሕ ኢና እዞም ዝተጠቐሱ ጠለባት ሰማዒ ዝረኹ ባዕልና ነቲ ኣብ ውሽጥን ኣብ ደገን እንገብሮ ዝተዋደደ ቃልሲ ብብቕዓት ክንመርሕ እንትኽኢልና እዩ ቀዳማይ ሸቶና ድማ ፖለቲካውን ግዝኣታውን ሉዓላውነትና ምምላስን ምውሓስን እዩ ኩሉ ቃልስታትና ናይ ምውሃዱ ጠለባት ነልዕል ዘለና ብቀዳምነት ነዚ ንምዕዋት እዚ ከይተረጋገፀ ህልውና ክብረት ሕውየት ልምዓት ዝበሃል የለን ብፍላይ ድማ ኣብ ዲያስፖራ ዘለኹም ኣሕዋትና ብዝምልከት ሓደ ክልተ ነጥብታት ክብል ይደሊ ነቱ ተካይድዎ ዘለኹም ተካይድኦ ዘለኽን ዝሕብን ቃልሲ ዘለነ ክብሮት ክገልጽ ይደሊ ካብ ኩሉ ዝሕበነኒ ድማ ኣብ ወፃኢ ዝተወለዱ ወይ ዝዓበዩ ወይ ድማ ወፃ ዝተምሃሩ ደቅና ናይቲ ነቲ ናይ ወለዶም ቃልሲ ንምርካብ ሓድሽ ዓቕሚ ኮይኖም ምኽታት ምጅማሮም ዓብይ ነገር እዚኦም ትምህርቲ ኣለዎም እዚኦም ኔትወርክ ኣለዎም ቴክኒካል ፍልጠት እውን ኣለዎም ብዙሕ ዓቕሚ ውሱና እዮም ክነተባብዑ ኣለና ንቅድሚት ክነምፅኦም ኣለና ዓጆኹም ክንብሎም ኣለና ካሊ ኣብዘ ዘለኹም ኮይንኩም ክንድማ ተዋሂድኩም ንየካቲት ክትዝክሩ ምስ ሰማዕኹም በዚ መንፈስ እዚ ንዓይ ናብዚ መድረኽ እዚ ቃለይ ከስምዕ ባይታ ብምፍጣርኩም ድማ ከምስግን ይፈቱ ናብዚ መድረኽ ዝዓደሙኒ ኣሕዋት ኣሓት ኣለዉ መን ትበሃሉ ኢለ እገለ ኢና ሓደ ከዓ መን ትበሃሊ እገለ እየ ዋ ሞ 6-7 ማሕበር ኮይንኩም በበይንኩም ተዓደምኩምኒ 7,000 ክዛረብ ዲኹም ደሊኹምኒ ኣይኸውን እዚ ናይ ሕብረት ናይ ሓድነት መድረኽ እዩ ተሓባቢርኩም ኩልኩም ነዛ መድረኽ እዚኣ እንተዳሊኹማ ሕራይ ተዘየሎ ብተናፀል ኣይመፅን ኢለዮ ክብረት ይሃበን ነዚ ሰሚዕኩም ኩልኩም ኣብ ኣውሮፓ ዘለኹም ኣብ ኣሜሪካ ዘለኹም ኣብ ካሊእ ከባቢታት ዓለም እውን ዘለኹም ብዘለኹምሉ ዝናይ ለማዓንቲ በዓል ክንዝክር ሓሳብ ክንላወጥ ዕድል ፈጢርኩም ክብረት ይሃበልና ይቕኒልና ድገሙ ኣጽንዕዎ ኣርዑት ናይቲ ኣብ ዓለም ለኸ መድረኻት ዝግበር ዘሎ ዲፕሎማሲ ኣድቮካሲ ነቲ ገበነኛታት ናብ ሕጊ ክቐርቡ እንገብሮ ናይ ምምሕፃን ይኹን ነዚ ዝድግፍ ወፍያ ናይ ምእካብ ቃልሲ ኣባኹን ይኸዱ ስለዝኾነ ድማ ሕብረትና ዝያዳ ዝተወደበ ይኹን ዓንቶ ብዛዕባ ሕብረት ጥምረት ተዛሪቦ ነይረ ብኣኹም ይጀመር ይብላል ብዙሓት ሽርፍራፍ ውዳበታት ሒዝካ ናብ ዓለማዊ መገባኤታት ምቕራብ ኣየድልን ምትእኽኻብ ይፈጠር ናብ ዓበይቲ ጥምረታት ይሰጋገራ ሓንቲ ማሕበር ታሉ ማለት ኣይኮነ ግን ጥምረት የድሊ ኣብ መንጎን ንጹር ናይ ዕዮ መቐላ ክህሉ ተማኺርክን ይህልምህን ተባሂልኩም ንጹር ናይ ዕዮ መቐላ ክህሉ ምድርራብ ከይህሉ ምድርራብ ናይ ሳሕ ከይህሉ ብኽነት ናይ ጉልበት ናይ ፍልጠት ከይህሉ ይመክር ካሊእ ተሓታትነት ንዓባላትን ተሓተቲ ዝኾና ማሕበራት እምበር ንባዕሎም ዝመረፁ ሰባት ንወትሩ ዘመሓድርዎን ትካላት ክህልዎን ኣይብለን ሕጋውነት ክህልዎን ኣሎ ካብኡ ሓሊፉ ኣሰራርሐን ዓቃውመን ኣሳታፍነት ዘለዎ ካብ ላዕሊ ክሻብታ ካብ ታሕቲ ንላዕሊ ዝተነደቐ ክኸውን ንግበር ብዙሕ ስራሕ እዩ እኒኦ ብዙሕ ወፃኢ ዝሓትት ስራሕ ይኽህልወና ብዙሕ ሃብቲ ናይ ምትእኻብ ወፍርታት ከድሊ እዩ እዚ ንኽህሉ ግን ቅጥዒ ዘለዎ ናይ ሃፍቲ ናይ ገንዘብ ምሕደራ متممان زفتر ناي ገንዘብ محدرة كفتر አለው ይብል ስለዚህ በዘጋጣም እዚ አመላእ ትግራዋይ ካብ ጫፍ ናብ ጫፍ ተፈጢሩ ዝኒኦ ሓድነት ተጠቂምኩም ውዳበታትኩም ቀልጢፍኩም አሳጣጥሙ ብዙሕ ስራሕ ኣለና ግዜ ይብልናን ይብለኩም ክቡራንን አመወዳታ ዝምድና ምስ ካልኦት ህዝብታት ኢትዮጵያን ምስ ኤርትራን አመልኪቱ ሓደ ክልተ ነጥብታት ክብል ይደሊ ብሰንኪ እዚ ኣብ ስልጣን ዝኒሄ ንመድረኽ ዘይምጥን ግናይ ፖለቲካዊ መሪሕነት ኢትዮጵያ ትግራይ ዓብይ ዋጋ ትኸፍለላ ግን እዚ ኣብ ትግራይ ዝድረተ ይኮነን እቲ ሃገር ብጠቕላላ እውን ገዚፍ ዋጋ ክትከፍል እያ ትኸፍል እውን ኣላ ልሂቃን ናይዛ ሃገር ኣብ ትግራይ ዝበፅሕ ጉድኣት ዶብ ከም ዘይህልዎ ነጊርናዮም ናይ ኢሳያስ አጀንዳ ናይ ኢትዮጵያ ተጠዋሪ ኮይንካ ምንባር ከም ዝኾነ ክግንዘው ተመክሮና ነጊርናዮም ንትግራይ ብምድፋዕን ንትግራይ ብምግፋዕን ናይ ኢትዮጵያ ሽግር ዝፍታሕ መሲልዎም ናይ ወፃእ ሓይልታት እውን ክተትኢሎም ዝጨፍጨፉና ልሂቃን ማእኸል ሃገር ኣብ ልዕሊ ኢትዮጵያውነትን ሓድነት ኢትዮጵያን ዘይሕከም ጉድኣት ፈጢሮም ኣሎ ድሮኳ እቲ ኣብ ጽላኣት ንትግራይ ዝተመስረተ ሓድነቶም ፈረኽረኽ ክብል ጀሚሩ ኣሎ ንስንሳቶም ድማ ናብ ምንኻስ ኣትዮም ኣለዉ ዘይ ቅዱስ ሓድነት መጨረሻው እዚ ከም ዝኸውን ጥርጥር የብሉ ዘይ ሕንከቶም ድማ ነቲ ናይ ወፃኢ ወረርቲ ዓዲሞም ዓዲሙ ዝጨፍጨፈና ግናይ መንግስቲ አብይ አሕመድ ዝገበሮ ተግባር ከይወቀሱ ብዛዕባ ዓገብ ናይቶም ወረርቲ ሓንቲ ቃል እኳ እንተይተንፈሱ ዓለም ብምሉኡ ይውፃእ እንትብል ንሳቶም ግና ብዛዕባ እዚ ምንም ትንፍስ ኣብ ዘይበሉ ኩነታት ስር ጥር ኢሎም ብዛዕባ ንዓና ዝወሃበና ቀለታን ትኳቦን ይዛረበሉ ኢትዮጵያዊ ለኢትዮጵያዊ መድረስ አለበት ይብሉሉ ኢትዮጵያውነትን ኢትዮጵያዊ ሰብነትን ርህራሄን ንዖም እዚ ምዃኑ ይነግሩና ኣለዉ ዕላጅ እዩ ንሕና ግን ንሶም ዝገበሩ ኢልና ብኹራን ብቁጥዕን ጉዳይ ህዝብታት ኢትዮጵያ ምቕንጫሩ እንብል ህዝቢ ኣይኮናን ኣብ ማእኸል እታ ሃገር ዜጋታት ኣለውና ብምእትታት ኣሽሓት ዝቁፀሩ ምሁራት ዓቕሚ ዘለዎም ዜጋታት ኣለውና መሓዙት እውን ኣለውና ክሕለወልና ንደልዮ ጥቕምታት እውን ኣለና ንዕኡ ንርእን በዚ ተመሪሕና ንቅድሚት ንእምት ህዝቢ ኮይና ክንርከብ እዩ ዝግባእ ይብለኩም እንተዘየሎ ንሕና እውን ካብኦም ኣይሓሽናን ማለት እዩ عد حكي عد فتحي عد ميزان نبهال حزبنا نحنا حكي حزكا عم قد حرس نبل حزبنا نحنا كابيا زولد كايوس كابيا زول كايوس زولد كايو يتألم النبل حزبي عد امنتنا كاوم زحشنا نزعلنا ناوم عين ورد سلاز غوانا دما كزون عمونغو تقراينا محران زنيه زمدنا بعبي حلافنات كنحزو يقبع زيل امنت اللم عبي احمد نتقراينا محران نمد ماي كون يلو تنكاساوشي وزي قدمو مخانو قدسات زيغاتات زغبرو صعرنيو كون يلو عنكي فوي نابزو خوينات دما اتينالو يخون امبار غوربيتكا እግዚአብሔር ዝሃበካይ አይትመርጽ بحبار بحد خوابي تغميتنا تفتيرنا غوربيت كوينا منوارنا ايترف ناتق علينا ناتق قاتلنا ناتدامنا عين نبر دم فساسن كويناتن نخلتنا يغود نخلتنا دما ندحريت يملسنا سلازقونه تغارو من تبعلنا لنا مسمح حراز هلونا ركب نام نور كملسن كلتنا بسلام ننبرلون تداقا كيفنا نلمحلو رأي كلونا يقباي تخزل لخناتات ريالنا سقر تخزل لخناتاتنا حمد الزلنا إيه زب الزلو قال أي أبي إثيوبيا بحافشة لوطن فتحن زدليو حزبتاتن محازوتن كم زلونا كنرس عيبلنا نهزب أورمو قالسو قالستات لهيكان أورمون نقالسنا زهو زلو ناي بوليتيكان ناي مورال ندقف كم حد أبنت نتكاسي كال تكبار أبيين إساياسن زخننو تبعات بوليتيكانياتاتن غازيطانياتاتون مقلقال جميروم الله كوينو دما قالسنا مسزيومن كمزيومن زامسلو تقالستي فتحي وهاد نعاناون نعامون استراتيجيكاو غداي مخانو مغنزاب يدرينا ኤርትራ ብዝምልከትውን ተመሳሳለ አንፈት ይخلوና ዝግቦ ኤርትራ ዘለና ዝምድና ብግፍዕታት ኢሳያስን ሰራዊቱን ዝውሰን አይኮነን ካው ዝገዘፈ ምትሰራት ካብ ዘለዎም ህዝብታት ኢና ተፈጢርና ዝጨፍጨፉና ኤርትራውያን አሉ ታይ ከምን ንገብር አይጠፈና ንዛዕባዚ ክዛረበኩም አይደለም ግን ድማ አው ጎንና ኮይኖም ነዚ ግፍዕታት እዚ ብዝተፈላለየ መልክዓት ዝቃለሱ ኤርትራውያን ከም ዘለው ባዕልና ውን ንምስክሮ ሓቂ زورا بزيادة نقرارب زعدني عدلاتنا دما عريو زتأساسر له عدل فطير له زي حق زي عاد قمت كنتو يدلي كوينو دما نستون فتح زداليو وغنات تقراريونا عم سرتاو قدات زتا خنقبر قال سنا خنت أساسر እንኽእለሉ መገድታት ክንፍትሽ ኣለና ኣፈላላይ ክህልወና እዩ እና እውን ዓንጫቃት ኢና ህልኸኛታት ኢና ሳቶም እውን ዓንጫቃት እዮም ህልኸኛታት እዮም ኣብ ኩሎም ክንሰማዕ ግን ግድን ኣይኮነን ኣፈላላይና ብሰላምን ብዘተን እምበር ብሓይሊ ክንፈትሖ ከምዘይንኽእልን ከምዘይግባእን ተተኣማሚና እኹል እዩ ግናትና ዓድመ ዝፍታሕ ይፍታሕ እዚ ዝቕፅል ትውልዲ ዝፍታሕ ድማ ይፍታሕ ብሓደ ግዜ ዘይተፈትሐ ብሓደ ግዜ ወረቐት ዘይተፈራረምናሉ ክንብል የብልና ብናተይ እምነት ስለዚ ኣብዚ ጉዳይ ዝውን ኣበርቲዕና ንስራሕ ንምጥቕላል ፈተውትን ደገፍትን ቃልስናን ህዝብናን ነሰስን ይብል ጸላእቲ ነውሕድ ይብል ንኻልኦት ከይነቕይም ንጠንቀቕ ተመሪርና ኾሪና ተቆጢዕና ሕልፊ ዘረባ ይንዛረብ ይብል በደል ኣለና እዩ ከመይ ከም እንመልሶ ንፈልጥ ኢና ሕልፊ ዘረባ ግን ኣየድልየና ንኻልኦት ከይነቕይም ንጠንቀቕ ዝብል ዘለኹ በዚ ንባዕልና ካብ መጻብብ ኣውፂና ዓውዲ ቃልስና ነስፍሕ ውሑድ ዓቕምን ድኹም ኢኮኖምን ሒዝካ ናይ ምስዓር ጥበብ ኣለና ነይሩና ብውይናው ዝበፅሕና ዳግም ድማ ንህድሶ ነማዕብሎ ይብል ሽግ የካቲት ዝተቆልዐ ንወትሩ ክነብር እዩ ዘለዓለማዊ ክብሪ ንስዋኣትና ጥዕና ይሃብለይ
يقنيلنا جينا تجدلي سيابرها بالعمينا نمسكن تي وقتاوي وانا وزخونه تمتعي أنفت قالت هزو تقراي نبيك خاد كم زلوه خميجر نخن حجز كم نقل لاب دياسبورا زلنا تجارو أمري زلو تقراي بمولو انت عينت سبنا تلاويسوت تي تجمرو زلو قال سقطيلو تقراي نعاوت هزونا نات أمريتنا نات أزخون اللي أنفت سلز حبر كنا خاول بينا نمسكن أخير كنا مسانا ونسلز متأخا بدعمينا نمسكنك خمت زول كايوسخا لكات أثرت حدا نمجمرة يكون نحزي يكون نفهم ألتقوا كنا نحلفو زلنا قدمون كوموني رؤيو جن جاغانو لدنا ندخلوا بدهوتات حليفكم سلامن هوا نمتحكم لنا نيركم حزون بأخي تسكونا ولا كله تفتنات التوزحة ناتاتكم نحين حبون ساني أنا تقال سنخ نقتل أبواوي جينا نيتاقر لي مخروبون سلازهاب كان قبل بينا نمسكن يغني لنا خبرتي حابلنا نكوعونا وتحنا نعخو نكوع بسحكا يغني لنا
أمين أمين thank you
Danny
Yeah, thank you, Tagarai C. Abraha. Thank you for your timely message. I can speak for much of those that are working to help our diplomatic and advocacy work by saying that your message is well deserved. This is a timely message for us to hear. I do want to summarize, if I could. I know it's difficult, but if I could, I would like to summarize your speech to the greater audience so that our youth and those that are born outside of Tigray can understand your message. Now, starting off with, the message that you start off, in recent years, we've celebrated Lakatit Asert Hada in different means. We started off, celebrating Lakatit Asert Hada in a peaceful demeanor in Tigray, but now we find ourselves in a very difficult place. In a difficult place, and in the sense that we are in a dark place, in a war zone. Peace is no longer the case for Tigrayans. Now, you said we celebrate to bring back our own existence. We celebrate to bring back and fight to bring back the dignity of our people and our rights to exist. And you said you have no doubt that we will restore the peaceful orders that we've had in Tigray. But the key component is that we have to examine why we are in the predicament that we are in today. We need to look into ourselves to overcome everything waged on us. We have to look into ourselves first. We have to examine what went wrong with ourselves to understand how we can get out of it. Let's see here. One of the main things is our unity. Our unity can be seen. Our unity is shown across the world amongst the Tigrayans and friends to come together and be the voice for our people. Let's see here. Now, to help ourselves, we must come together to assess an inclusive route. When we say an inclusive route, the fight that we are going through today needs to be one where everyone, every stakeholder from Tigray must be a part of. And so one of the main things that we need to be very mindful of is we are being inclusive of everyone within our fight, everyone. That goes without saying. Overcoming obstacles isn't new to us. We've had challenges in the past, and this isn't the first time. We will continue to do the same as we knew it then. So all the challenges that we faced in the past, this would be also part of our struggle. We need to enhance that what have worked, what worked in the past, and we also need to look at different ways to make sure that we're elevating ourselves into the new ways of how things work in the world. What worked back in the 70s, 80s, and maybe even early 90s may not work today. So we must learn to let go of those, and we must enhance our ways of doing things today. A few things that you pointed out first, an inclusive approach to making sure all stakeholders are with us on this fight. Our unity is the most important component of our fight to eliminate our enemy. We can have political differences, we can have any other differences, but ultimately we want to see the best for our people in Tigray. And so to do so, we may not look at our differences, but look at what makes us together and fight to make sure that we are enhancing on those. TPLF has made miracles into liberating the people of Tigray, but it shouldn't stop there. It should also fight into bringing victory again by providing a platform for everyone, all the stakeholders. Let's see here. We need to adjust to all the tactics of the war. Now, in wars, it's not the physical war that we must be focused on. You can pick a gun and fight. That's one way of fighting the war. Some of the other way of fighting the war is, for example, we have folks who've shown that, you know, attending meetings, and then they would actually speak up and tell them that the atrocities taking place when they're asked to attend meetings with the Prosperity Party folks. This is one way of fighting the war. Public servants also are fighting on this fight. They are showing a way of saying what's taking place in Tigray is not something acceptable. And so that's also another means of fighting this war. And let's see here, the contributions from abroad. This is the diplomacy, advocacy work that our youth who are primarily not born in Tigray and are coming together to help the people of Tigray. They are working day in, day out to make sure that the people of the world, key influencers, understand the atrocities taking place in Tigray. And let's see here. Now, we all know that, shutting down the internet, not allowing independent media access to journalists is part of the tactics into making sure that the voices of the people is not being put out there. But the advocacy work that the Tagaros across the world are doing is bringing that to the forefront. Now the world knows exactly what's taking place in Tigray. Not exactly, but they are getting a glimpse of what's taking place in Tigray. This is coming as a shocker to the federal government that is waging this war on our people. Now the world so far has only shown words, statements to show what's taking place in Tigray, but they have not really taken an action. Now, this is an indication for all of us to know, although we have gone far enough to expose the things that are taking place in Tigray, but the fight still continues. So in this fight, there's a lot of work that waits us in doing and bringing a change that we need to see, which is action. The action that the international community must take. Let's see here. Now there are a few demands Ato Tagalasi Abraha has mentioned, and part of those I'm going to mention them one by one. First is Higdef troops or Eritrean troops must exit out of Tigray immediately. That's a must. We've been advocating for that for a long time, but this is something that needs to be taken as an action. The sovereignty of Tigray needs to be stable, and it needs to be upheld. The interim administrations must be abolished. The government needs to be returned. This is a government that was elected by the people of Tigray and must be restored and brought back into to governing Tigray. And independent investigators must enter to see the atrocities that took place within the different parts of Tigray. Displaced about 4.5 million Tigrayans to be returned, brought back to their humble homes, and access to food aid, humanitarian aid must be restored. There needs to be access to journalists to investigate things that took place. There needs to be investigation into the assets of public and private entities that were destroyed, looted, political prisoners to be released, to start the peace talks to come and have that conversation on the table. We have many questions that need to be raised. We need to, these are questions that would come afterwards, but to specify, to bring those that have committed heinous acts into justice, restore assets that were looted and destroyed, meaning there needs to be some sort of compensation to make sure that what was looted and destroyed needs to be restored back to where it was. Let's see, in the process of saving our existence, the government of Tigray needs to defend the honor of Tigray, and that's the statements that they have mentioned. We need to work to make sure that the world understands what's really taking place, even more than we are doing right now. We're the sole owners of the fight to our people, and this is important that everyone needs to know. No one is going to fight our fight. Our fight is our fight. So Tigrayans, friends, anyone that takes a shared sympathy for Tigray needs to work hard into making sure that the world understands that what's really taking place and proper action is taken. Now to the diasporas, the folks that are working, you're doing a wonderful job, and Tagalasi Abraha would like to appreciate the work that you've done so far, but also asks of you to continue to make sure your fight continues, is intensified. The other thing he said is to the greater community of our people. Our people need to understand that the diaspora youth that are working extremely hard needs to be engaged in this. They must be brought to the forefront of what's taking place, or how we conduct ourselves. And he also appreciated the folks who invited him to come to the celebration. The celebration was done by multiple organizations. Now, he was invited by multiple organizations to come and speak, but he specified that speaking to 8 organizations is untangible. It's not something that shows a unity within our people. Therefore, the collaboration between all of the organizations to make sure that they are working together for the same cause was important. And he's happy to be here to speak on some of the things that he brought on. And so make sure that this is a message to all the organizations. Make sure all the organizations, you work together, you collaborate, and you're not repeating the same activities as you independently do. Let's see here. But there are some rules of engagement that we have to adhere to. We work for the people of Tigray. We are working extremely hard to make sure that the people of Tigray bring some level of normalcy. In doing so, we need to engage in a way that we have some rules that govern us. A lot of work await us. A lot of work await us to rebuild Tigray. And in doing so, we need to make sure that we are working in the most transparent fashion, and we need to bring wealth to Tigray to make sure that the people have jobs, conditions that they are used to, if not enhanced from what it used to be. Also, the second component is our reaction to other Ethiopians and Eritreans needs to be very carefully thought of. We are paying a heavy cost for this war by the government of Ethiopia and other stakeholders. But that doesn't mean that the pain ends with us. The pain goes across multiple dimensions. There are consequences that trigger and fall over into other regions as well as countries. And so just make sure that you're extremely careful with that. Where the world was told, as the world is telling the Eritrean troops to leave, and it's telling the federal government of Ethiopia to stop its heinous acts, they continue to speak about the crumbs that they want to throw at our direction. And with this, just to make sure that we continue to work to make sure that things are good. Now, one other thing that he mentioned is that we are the people who care for the strangers of our own families. The acts of Tigrayans has been always to make sure that we look out for strangers or people who come across us more than our own family. So make sure you keep that value. Your neighbors are your neighbors for a reason. No need to do that. For our own sake, the relationship between Amhara and Tigray must be restored to the old ways. Let's not forget the other friends that we have in Ethiopia. Oromia and others are fighting for the political fight just like us. This is something that we need to be very mindful of. In terms of Eritrea, it's the same. The relationship between Tigrays and Eritreans cannot be determined by Isaias and its military. We have Eritreans who are fighting to undo the damages that Isaias and his forces are doing. We must look for ways to solve issues we all face. We need to work on this very well. Let's work to build allies. Let's not add any more enemies. We have the ability to do this. We had the ability to do this, but make sure that we are enhancing it. Thank you very much for Tagalay, Abraham, for your timely message. I think most of us were eager to hear you speak, but we're humbled for your presence in this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. يقنيلنا thank you Danny بدقامي نتي comprehensive ዝኾነ summary ናይ ጅግና ተጋዳላይ ስያ አብርሃ ነቲ larger audience ለዘስማዕኸልና ንምስግን ቀጢልና ከምቲ ሓንቶ ዝበልናኩም ብዙሓት ምድለዋት እዮም ዘለውና ከምቲ እናተባሃልናዮ ፀናሕና ቀደም ገድሊ እውን ንዓመረ ብዙሓት ሰባት ክጋደሉ ብዛዕባ ተቃልሲ ክንፈልጥ ክፈልጡ ዝተገበረ ብሙዚቃ ብደርፊ እናገበሩ እዮም ነይሮም ኪነት ጉጅለ ኪነት ኣብቲ ናይ ህዝቢ ትግራይ ቃልሲ ዓብዪ ሚና እዩ ተጫዊቱ ሕዚ እውን ምጫወት ይቕፅል ኣሎ እሞ ካብቶም ደርፍታት ሓድቲ ናባኹም ኣቢልና ካብኡ ተመሊስና ኣብ መሬት ኣብ ትግራይ ዝርከባ ሰለስተ ውዳበታት ናይ ፖለቲካ ውዳበታት ጥምረት ዘውፅኦ መግለፂ ስለ ዘሎ ናተድው ክንሰምዕ ኢና ፈለማ ናብቲ ደርፊ ክንሓልፍ ማለት እዩ ሓበን
ትግራይ ዘይትነጽፍ ቃላይ መቦቆል ይወተይ ትግራይ ዘይትነጽፍ ቃላይ ትግራይ ዘይትነጽፍ ቃላይ አዶ ተዳዳላይ ትግራይ ዘይትነጽፍ ቃላይ ትግራይ ዘይትነጽፍ ቃላይ መቦቆል ይወተይ ትግራይ ዘይትነጽፍ ቃላይ ትግራይ ዘይትነጽፍ ቃላይ አዶ ተዳዳላይ ትግራይ ዘይትነጽፍ ቃላይ من تتكور تانكتاكي نولا من تحن سنتوب نفرت نزلا وبعرف نبي فتي منق زيبل أما أخلق أتيو بزعقهم يبل إكام السعامو ولا انت عدمو انت عبرك حيزهم لما انك قدمو طوي عزيز محن باي عادو يشالن كيبلك زي قلب لمادو يجعلي عبرك يا مجال إن كان إيدي نستغام وعبركي فلفل على الحقوي بحال سلم قالاي شتولي بحالاي مدلك خطاي تقراي زي قالاي فوت لبرغا شباغا وين جتنا بقلغا ودر بغا وينو بحال سكون وجاما يبل اللغو أما خميلا فريما هراي بلون هراي جزان تدراي عدو تقدلاي زيتون تقلاي زعاتي تدراي هراي بلون هراي قبر هراي جزان تدراي هراي جزان تدراي هراي بلون هراي جغان تقراي عدو تقدلاي زيتون تقلاي زعاتي تقراي هراي بلون هراي قولو تقراي هراي قبر هراي ليلا دي بلو سوبراري يسال بلو زوغارو زحبرو تقراي بلو ويكدمبر بلو ماي بلو يسال بلو بلو
A joint press release by Salsawian Tigray, Sawot National Congress Tigray, the Congress, and the Tigray Independence Party tip on the current situation in Tigray. More than 100 days have been counted since the invasion of Tigray by allied forces of tyranny from within and outside of Ethiopia. During those 100 days of pain and agony for Tigray, all kinds of abominable horrors have been committed by these forces on Tigray and its people. Tigray's territories are scrambled like a fallen prize body. Its people are indiscriminately killed, properties destructed and looted, and women are raped. All the cringing stories of horror are still counting unabated. The invasion of Tigray cannot be said to have come as a surprise to the international community. We are aware that the government of Tigray had been notifying the international community of an impending invasion of Tigray through open letters, press release, and every means it had. So been pleading for action from the international community before things went out of hand. Regrettably, all the players by the government of Tigray fell on deaf ears, and we are all left to witness all the destruction and humanitarian crisis that has unfolded. In the last 100 days, it is with great sorrow that we learned the East Africa region was left to be ruled by force rather than law. During this unfortunate days, nations have invaded other nations with no precincts. A government has invited invading armies on its own people. Nations have sent drones to massacre people of another nation. Armies have committed war crimes with impunity, and many more other horrific acts have become daily occurrences, hurting the hearts and minds of all humanity. It is unfortunate to see the nations in the region are learning diplomacy, negotiations, and peaceful engagement are becoming language of the weak, and force seems to be the only way to secure survival. I have become a target of all these acts of violence because they chose to exercise their right to self-determination through an election with the biggest turnout in their history and the hopeful participation of opposition parties. In this election, the people of Tigray showed their deep aspiration for democracy and the plurality of ideas. Contrary to this, though, the invaders, both foreign and domestic, have either no incident of election in their history or decided to postpone an election to cling to power without popular will. Tigray was seen as a bad example by the invaders as a bad example against their plan for the region as a whole. Thus, the invasion is an invasion of tyranny on a democratic aspiration of a people. We are afraid that inaction on the part of international community has begun to nurture new dictatorship in the Horn of Africa, in addition to the ones that we already had. Inaction by international community will also expedite the catastrophe of the human disaster in Tigray and further push the mobilization of the Tigray people for another armed resistance. We fear that situation in Tigray will further escalate to the regions as we have started to observe signs of that. It is becoming a firm assertion of not only us, but of all concerned people, governments, and institutions of the globe that failure to act by the international community will make the Horn of Africa an epicenter of unparalleled human misery. The effect of this unfortunate situation in this region will definitely be felt far and across the world beyond the seas as well. With a firm belief that the international community will act and spare this region from the looming disaster, we, the above-mentioned opposition parties in Tigray, call upon the international community to act for a second time in weeks. In what follows, we are just repeating all our demands in our previous press release. The international community should act swiftly. 1, to ensure an immediate withdrawal of the invading Eritrean army. 2, to ensure an immediate withdrawal of the aggressor Amhara militia and the Ethiopian army. 3, to ensure a secure access and direct humanitarian assistance in Tigray. 4, to ensure unrestricted access to the international media to get to Tigray and cover what's happening. 5, to ensure a deep, independent, and international investigation of the egregious war crimes and crimes against humanity that are committed by all forces that wreaked havoc in Tigray and make perpetrators accountable. 6, to press the Ethiopian government to stop on the ongoing war in Tigray and start a dialogue process aiming at resolving the political problems in Tigray and the country. Tigray will prevail. Salsa Wayana Tigray, Sawot National Congress of Great Tigray, Tigray Independence Party, February 2021, Maqala, Tigray.
يغنيلنا بدعمينا مسكن كم تسمعهم تمرت تنحنحتي دابتات بوليتيكا ودابتات تجراي بتوكلت نبيلن زحلفوا ملختي إنا سمعنا كافت ملختن ببزوح ترديهم وإنا تسفان قبر جن بحفشة نتبلع الهزة تجراي وتحزر له وتعاتاتن بدلاتاتن أفلت أو دحرمها ناي عالم محورسة لزد اللي سقمت نخوسد أي عملو كافتن كسروا زقبوا يلوم بزرزر عمتوا مدما تحدن تقدم يعني يلوم زعمتوا كلهم ورحت حيلتات كاميرا تجراي تجحيت نخوتوا أي عملو بمقتال ناي عالم لخ ميدياتات أو تجراي أتيوم متزقبر زلوا نجار نخطوا ناي عالم محورسة بالعلي والكامل أخي ناي منجست إثيوبيا أبي أحمد دفئت نخجوروت أيام خاب مقتال سالساي وجن متأري أكل ناو تجراي وريدو تبلع الهزبنا كحزي زبطحو بدلات كلهم بقريق وتر تمرميرهم لحد ما تم بتعن بدل زوجحو حيلتات زت يقولوا بحقي زت يقولون زخفلوا للمسرح ونخزر قحوت أي عملوا أمود دعتا زرر من خجبر تزرر دما سلام نخمت هزو ناس تبلع اليو تعوج زلوت أرنت أو زبلوا لمن قدنا مخفت أرون يمتقويعم بحفشة جنتوانا زقلتوا نعلم محورسة سقمت سلزي وسادة أو إثيوبيا خونا وكورنا أفريقيا حيال زبهال عنوت كبت حزقل نقولت أملحن ملختنتن ديكتاتورشيب المنجستي في الترلو زي ما تتعنتو أو تجراين أو كورنا أفريقيا ترح زي كونس نعلم ون كبت حزقل كم زخون أيام مرة جيتهم سلزي نتوزحلف لنا ملختنا مسكنا بإنجليزية سلزنا ورأينا تجرينيا استرقم زلهم بمقتل هزب تجراي نلعلي حدا مئتي معلتات قوينو ولو تبلع ليو زرقنا متنات خابزو وجلو كافتا على تساجميرون معرة هزو تجراي أو قون قوينهم وتعان بدلاتن هزو تجراينا علم محورسة نمفلات كمانا خم تولت تجارو أقولنا قوينهم زساتفو نايوت زيجاتات كونو إثيوبياوين قندما تجارو زي كونو أحواتنا علونا مو لو معنتي نعاتهم يقني لنا أنو للو مدون سلستدالي نعاتهم زب خبري عدينا يوم لنا جن بتزقبوا كبري النافالتو نافت مدرخ نخطو عنا لدكتور سلومون يتمدرخ كجدف حزي دكتور سلومون قال لهم تخوينكم كرمي داني.
Exactly. So just we're introducing Dr. Solomon to introduce the different activists that have been fighting on behalf of Tigray for the atrocities that are taking place. So Dr. Solomon, if you will, please take the stage and introduce the individuals that are here to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Maza. Thank you, Danny. This particular segment, Dr. Tsaga Gabriel and myself would be introducing. So I will first give the floor to Dr. Tsaga. Dr. Tsaga.
سلام كما يمشيكم كما يوعدكم أمو العالم تركبوا. It's a wonderful time to be here to celebrate and reflect on the past and think about our future together. As Maaza explained and Dr. Solomon explained, we'll be basically extending our gratitude to a number of individuals who've really stood by the people of Tigray during this crisis. So we're going to introduce some of them now and give them an opportunity to speak. Thank you on behalf of all of us for standing by our side. It's in times of trouble and pain when you see who's really there. Thank you for using your platforms, your insights, your expertise, your knowledge to help and bring light to all of the atrocities that have occurred. You won't be forgotten. I'm going to start now with Dr. Fiona Meehan. Dr. Fiona worked with the Relief Society of Tigray, REST, and the TPLF in the 1980s. Following the their rise to power, the EPRDF, she worked for 12 years with REST in Addis Ababa and in Mekelle. Dr. Fiona, are you here? Let's see.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation to come and speak to you this evening. It's a privilege to be able to join with you in this commemoration of the 46th anniversary of TPLF. The invitation I got to say a few words tonight did ask me particularly to speak about the people of Tigray. And it does seem very fitting on this particular day, I suppose, because TPLF are and always have been so very definitively a People's Liberation Front. And it was, for those of us who got involved in the 70s and 80s, it was one of the things that distinguished TPLF from a lot of the other liberation movements and various resistance groups around the world. It was the fact that TPLF were never, ever just a military organization, or even just a military organization with a strong political philosophy. From the very earliest days, they worked with local civilians and communities to establish civilian administration, for instance, people's associations, elected councils. Within a very few years of starting, even as a very small group, they were operating health departments, education, agricultural departments, delivering services to people and trying to improve livelihoods and food security. As a movement, they never ever lived off the people. They lived with the people in a strong partnership of trust and solidarity and engagement in a common struggle. That closeness of the relationship between the fighters and the civilians was very, very clear to all those of us who crossed the border from Sudan into Tigray during those days. What was also really, really clear was that people were never ever passive partners in that enterprise, in administrating those areas, in engaging with the struggle against the Derg. The first time I went to Tigray, I was invited into the People's Conference in Western Tigray. And there were delegates there from all the different villages and all the areas in the Western region. And what really struck me and almost took me aback to some extent was the extent of the debate and the argument that went on during that conference. All of those delegates, they argued their way through that conference. They debated every point they weren't happy with or anything they were disputing. And then on another trip, I was invited into a women's conference. And again, that was delayed for a whole week. We couldn't get into the conference because they were arguing so strongly against proposals from the leadership, which would have shifted their role in the military. And they were just absolutely not having it. They fought and argued. And the whole conference took a week later because of that. And this was really, really common throughout all my years' involvement and working in Tigray afterwards. I don't think I've ever been at a meeting or a gum-gum where, there wasn't really hot debate and argument all the way through. So, depictions of the people of Tigray as somehow oppressed or under the thumb of liberation fronts during that time was certainly not how any of us experienced it. Another really vivid memory from that time was one night in Kaza, and suddenly all these literally thousands and thousands of people appeared apparently out of nowhere, and they were building roads, and the entire night, by the light of kind of flickering kerosene torches and some arc lights from mobile generators, with shovels and machetes and pickaxes, they were literally carving roads out of the mountainside all night. And it was just an extraordinary experience and a really, really inspiring one. And it's one that I still have, it's one of my most vivid images that I still hold from that time. And then in the years after that, working with REST in Tigray, I watched those same people building up the region after the war, terracing thousands and thousands of hectares of land and planting millions of trees, building up enterprise, building up constructing roads, buildings, housing throughout the region. It is at the moment, it is hard sometimes to stay optimistic when we see how much of what has been built up since that last war being dismantled in the current times. I had thought back in the 80s, seeing how the Derg bombed people going into Sudan and the destruction, the horrific destruction and bombing of a housing market, that it was about the worst that war could do. But I think for sheer brutality, cruelty and wanton destruction, Abiy Ahmed's regime has now outdone has outdone the Derg. But I still believe that stubborn, determined and independent-minded spirit that I experience so strongly with the people of Tigray, that it will prevail. It's that spirit which drives the current resistance, and that determination and resilience which will rebuild after this war. But all of them, fighters and civilians, are up against so much more than back in the time of the Derg. They weren't fighting the Eritreans then, they weren't fighting the Amharas, and they had an open border. So the challenges are enormous at this time, and they need all of us on the outside to stand with them and to mobilize support and to keep that pressure up on the international institutions, particularly to intervene and to stop the war against Tigray. It was really heartening this week to see the spirit of defiance and resistance in the fireworks exploding over Mekelle, and to see the colours of the red and yellow that were dispersed around Mekelle. One of the earliest Tigrinya phrases I learned when I went to the field first was Awd and Hafash, or Awd and Hisbi. And I think there's probably never been a more appropriate slogan for these times. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was such a beautiful message, and I think it very effectively provides a testament to the industriousness, hard work, and the free-spirited nature of the people. So thank you so much for your words. Next, we're going to invite Gail Warden. Gail began working with the TPLF in 1989, editing the People's Voice magazine, and carried out press officer duties for the EPRDF as the war against the Derg went to its climax and then concluded. In 1998, she worked with Ato Dawit Yohannes in the Ethiopian parliament as a human rights conference coordinator. In June 1998, she transferred her roles to the Ethiopian government spokesperson's office as press officer. And during the first, she also served in that role during the first half of the border war with Eritrea. From 2000, she was a consultant at the Ethiopian embassy in London and also wrote articles. She's now semi-retired, but continues with public relations consulting, writing and editing. Gail Warden, if you wouldn't mind unmuting your mic. And
I've unmuted.
Great.
You see me. Hi, Fiona. Can you see me?
We can see you perfectly.
Yes. Oh, okay, fine, good. I can just see you. Okay, fine. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm greatly honoured to be able to put on record my long-held admiration for Tigrayans and for the TPLF, one of the most effective political movements the world has seen, in my view. Tigrayans are brave and bold people, and they've always sought peace and security, justice and equality, not just for themselves, but for all Ethiopians. And it's clear they had a clear vision of a better life for everyone. The people of Tigray and of wider Ethiopia were fortunate to have champions who had their best interests at heart. I took this lesson on board when, in late '89, as a new recruit to the TPLF's London office, I took over responsibility for editing People's Voice from Fiona, who is here today, who we just heard. Hello, Fiona. it became clear to me that I was very fortunate to be working with some of the greatest thinkers, people with vision, who didn't work in the abstract. They applied their intellect to bettering people's lives. I was honoured to consult with intellectuals such as Noai Gebrab, who wrote articles for People's Voice, and I was very fortunate to meet a wonderful, wise, kind and thoughtful Siyum Mesfin, who was in charge of TPLF's foreign affairs. He and the brilliant Brahani Gebri Christos, who was in charge of media relations, turned up at the TPLF office, and I arranged for them to meet the media, and they handled it with great skill, and media coverage of the TPLF began to improve. Early on, I asked my TPLF colleagues, if you do take power in Ethiopia, what will you do with it? And from their responses, it was very clear that theirs was a politics of conviction. They faced problems head on and advocated solutions. Through the interaction with people who turned up at the office with increasing frequency to discuss what TPLF and then EPRDF was about, I learned that they were going to introduce a new constitution which would enshrine the rights of all Ethiopian nationalities. This got me wondering why the UK does not have a written constitution. It still doesn't. The media began taking an increasing interest in TPLF, and by early 1991, European foreign ministries began calling to ask for meetings. Many were dismissive of the victories that EPRDF was scoring, but in the end, they had to admit that the front was winning not just battles, but the war. The night before the peace talks held in London, but at the American embassy, the TPLF leaders stayed not in a hotel, but at our offices in Stockwell. I thought this indicated the soundness of their beliefs in working together in the same way as they had done as fighters in the field. And their strong belief in their convictions was tempered by their humility. They saw how being in government, they could transform Ethiopia for the better. Unlike some we could mention, they were just not interested in the trappings of power. Mengistu had fled the country and the EPRDF was on its way to government. The day after the successful peace talks, Meles came over to the Stockwell office and met and shook hands with all the staff. Needless to say, we were overwhelmed and there was a sense of history being made. No developing country government has ever better understood the needs of its people. TPLF taught me what matters in life. They molded the political person I have become. Their priority was the war against poverty, and they were determined to see it through, and they did. Their policies improved the lives of the poor, the majority of Ethiopians, through a tailored agro-industrial policy which achieved a momentous economic transformation. After working for TPLF, I took a post with a group that was campaigning for a better voting system and other reforms for the UK. 6 years later, the new Labour government under Tony Blair introduced many of our proposed reforms, but not voting reform. So at this point, I would like to congratulate you on the election that you held recently in Tigray, which not only honoured Ethiopia's constitution, but as far as I can see, you are the first nation of an African country to use a partly proportional voting system, which is much fairer for smaller and opposition parties than the first past the post system used in the UK and elsewhere. Finally, I am so proud to have known Meles, Siyum and other TPLF heroes, and I'm proud of you all. You have shown great courage and strength that few can match. So I repeat, it is an honour to know you all and to have worked with you for more than half of my working life. I have no doubt that you will triumph on the road to justice and decency. History will judge you accordingly, and I intend to see that it does. You can count on my continuing support from now on and into the future. Tigray and the TPLF will prevail.
Thank you so much, Gail. That was beautiful. Thank you. That was beautiful.
The end.
The end. Now we will be segueing over to Miss Jenny Hammond. Is it Dr. Jenny Hammond? Excuse me. First visited Tigray in 1986 at the invitation of the TPLF and returned in the following years to record and monitor the conduct of the struggle against the Derg. Some of this information went into 2 books published in the 1990s, one being Sweeter Than Honey, Testimonies of Tigrayan Women, and Fire from the Ashes, a personal account of the revolution in Tigray. In the 1990s, she spent long periods living in the Tigrayan countryside and used her experience and her findings for a PhD presented to Oxford University in 2000. She's unable to be here today due to prior commitments, so Gail Warden will be reading a short statement on her behalf. I think we've been asked to try and translate some of this to Tigrinya, so I'll do my best. ታትቕፅል Dr. Jenny Hammond ትበሃል መጀመርያ ጊዜ ትግራይ ዝኸደትሉ ዓመት 1986 ብኽብሪ ተዓዲማ ነይራ ብህወሓት እቲ ምኽንያት ናይ ምኽያድያ excuse me ነቲ ኣንጻር ደርግ ዝተኻየደ ቃልሲ ብዛዕባኡ ክትፅሕፍ ክልተ መፅሓፍቲ ከዓ ፅሒፋ ኣብ 9 ሰዓታት ማለት እዩ ሓደ ብዛዕባ ደቂ ኣንስትዮ እቲ ካልእ ከዓ ብዛዕባ ትናታ ዝረኣየቶ ቴስቲሞኒ ናይቲ ቃልሲ ናይ ህዝቢ ትግራይ ኣብ 9 ሰዓታት ብዙሕ ዓመት ጌራ ትነብር ነይራ ኣብቲ ሃገረሰብ ናይ ትግራይ ተሞክሮ ናይ ሂወታ ከዓ ትግራይ ተስተማሃረቶ ንዶክትሬት kind of foundation night doctorate nata of Oxford University ya tamarriqa ab 2000 عامة مهرت لو معلتي نسانا كت كون اي تخلن كال سرح سلازنبرا حجي اب كندا Gail Warden كت زاربيا حدا ما الاختي كتحلفنا يا. So if you wouldn't mind, Gail, in my very broken diaspora Tigrinya, try to explain.
Better than my Tigrinya.
If you wouldn't mind giving your short statement on her behalf, that would be great.
Okay. Can you still hear me? Yeah. Good. Okay, this is Dr. Jenny Hammond. So it's her speaking. First, I want to thank you for inviting me to join with you in celebrating Yekatit, the 46th anniversary of the founding of TPLF. I regret that a previous engagement prevents my being with you in person. The first Yekatit that I attended was in February 1987, the 12th anniversary. It was held in the forests of western Tigray, sparsely populated, concealed from the eyes of the Derg by the huge trees of the lowlands. The struggle against the Derg was still in full swing. It was a unique occasion because for the first time in the Amhara organization, it was the first time the Amhara organization, the Ethiopian People's Democratic Movement, as it was then called, was taking part. It was engaged in talks which would lead to the founding of EPRDF, the coalition which was to lead the struggle southwards into the rest of Ethiopia. But Yekatit itself was essentially a celebration of music and song. I returned to England after 2 or 3 months, inspired by what I had witnessed in the Tigrayan countryside. What differentiated the TPLF from other political movements against the Derg was its emphasis on social change. They chased out the oppressive elites, the feudals. They divided the land and established the first health centres and schools the farming communities had known. Over time, they first encouraged and then trained the people to administer themselves through the baito, or village councils. I'm sure you know all this, but I want to convey at this celebration the source of the admiration for Tigray I have felt ever since, and which was intensified on every subsequent visit. It is this that gives me confidence that despite the terrible actions of Abiy Ahmed and Isaias Afwerki, there is hope for the future, and that the Tigrayan people will work with their leaders to find new and long-term solutions.
That was excellent. It says a lot about the two of you that you were so actively involved and engaged during the armed struggle against the Derg. Not an easy time to be living and working and really standing with the people in a very difficult time.
Well, Jenny was more exposed though, because she was actually behind the battle lines. She was, you know, in the war zone. I was safely ensconced in London, but she was out there with the guys. So amazing.
Thank you so much for being here and for reading that statement on her behalf. Thank you. It's an honor to meet you. Next, we're going to be a pleasure. Next, we're going to be introducing Professor Alex Duwal. Alex Duwal is Executive Director of the World Peace Foundation. He's a research professor at the Fletcher School at Tufts University and a professorial fellow at the London School of Economics. He's worked on the Horn of Africa related issues and on humanitarian issues since the 1980s as both a researcher and a practitioner. He was the author of the Human Rights Watch report, Evil Days, 30 Years of War and Famine in Ethiopia. It was published in 91. Professor Duwal's recent books include The Real Politics of the Horn of Africa, Money, War, and the Business of Power. This is published in 2015, which is dedicated to the memory of Mallas Zenawi, as well as a book called Mass Starvation, The History and Future of Famine, which was published in 2018. Haji, the Tigrinya Kumukro, right before you speak, Professor Duwal. Professor Duwal of Tufts University's Bahal, Fletcher School's Bahal Professor you, أو يزرح زلو حجي. Dima fellow you, I don't know how to say fellow in Tigrinya, of London School of Economics Bahal Timirti of London Zirkab. نزحلف سلاسة عمت of شجرات way عودتات way I don't know how to say subjects of قرن أفريقيا زركب issues يزرح نيرو كسرح تانيحو بحلفي of humanitarian of نايسب أو نت قدايات كسرح تانيحو يو he صحافة يو he's written a number of books حدا أنا زنبب كوا report Evil Days 30 Years of War and Famine in Ethiopia بزعبات الشجر كله تزحلفه بناي درج جيزية زتصحافة زعب نجر ينعنا because أبستولدنا بزح نجر we learned زعبات تاريخنا كاب reportات تزحافة تشعر جيزية دوال Professor دوال حجيكا كلتا مزحف تحيف له أزحلفه حمشت عمت حدا بزعبات بوليتيكا نايكرن أفريقيا بزعبات جنزب كوينات power سلطان I look forward to reading it إذا ما تحب تزيد ما بزعبات زي كونه dedicated نت تاريخ نايملا زيناوي ت زخري نايملا زيناوي كان أيما تحفوكا mass starvation حفشاوي not حفشاوي maybe ناي حفش تميت I don't know how to say that but basically to تاريخ دما زمت زلو جيزية بزعبا famine politically motivated starvation كلتا شحن عسرتا شمونتن published تجبرة. Professor Duwal, if you don't mind joining us now, we'd love to hear from you. It's an honor to introduce you.
Thank you so much, and it's an honor and a privilege to be with you. And I think you missed out for me